Thomas, what an exciting letter from Senator Chuck Grassley. It looks like they've got a dragnet going there in the D.C. swamp. Tell us about that letter.
Oh, my goodness. It's so beautiful. We have to give a shout out to old Chuck because he's like one of the generals in the Second American Revolution. He keeps sending out these letters that are very upsetting. He's the head of the Judiciary Committee. And he sent not only letters to the Democratic National Committee and John Podesta, and basically Hillary Clinton through her Hillary Clinton campaign, the Hillary for America, and then to Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the head of the Democratic National Committee for a while until she was shamed by getting caught from all the cheating that she was doing and stepped down. And there's a lawsuit against her and the Democratic National Committee at this very moment. And then Donna Brazile, who took her place, and a few others. So he and another senator sent these out to request information for the Judiciary Committee so that they could bring in these people, as you say, like a dragnet. So this is a list of a dragnet of the people involved with the Fusion GPS garbage dossier, what I call the garbage dossier.
Actually, when I saw that list, now, folks, if you haven't seen the letter, I'll make sure that there's an article link so that you can see it. You'll read to whom the letter went, but at the very bottom of the letter, you're going to see a list of people that are required to submit within 2 weeks more information to the Judiciary Committee. But when you look at the list, it's a ton of names. Some of the names you're going to recognize, some you won't have a clue. But when I saw the list, Thomas, I saw a chain of evidence. I saw the various people and how this process worked. Now, you've got the list in front of you. Can you kind of walk us through how that might have looked?
Yes, but we have to remember, just as you said, this is one net that was thrown, and these are people who were swept up, obviously, in whatever it is that Senator Grassley has as evidence indicating that these people are connected to this, because we already know that John Podesta testified he didn't know anything about the dossier, and then a week later he admitted he certainly did, and that he did pay for it, and he paid for it through Perkins and Coy, through Mark Elias, who was sitting next to him at the congressional investigation and hearing when he basically perjured himself. So eventually when John Podesta comes back, he's going to have to, explain why he perjured himself, why he lied on purpose. And then Mark Elias also lied, and then literally 1 week later said, no, we did pay for it. And then a few days later, Hillary comes out and says, yeah, we paid for it, and we're proud of it. And then when it comes out that it seems as if you believe what's in this garbage dossier, which no one would with a 5th grade education or above, but if you read it and you actually believed it, it says that they colluded with Russians to get this information and that they used a spy, a British spy named Christopher Steele, and his group called Orbis Business Intelligence Limited. Now, what we know very clearly, and we could go into this because we have so many times before, because we've actually laid out the true timeline. The true timeline is different than perhaps the Congress knows at this moment in their investigations. But this is a great thing because it shows that Congress is not going to let this go. The Federal Elections Commission already came in and said, okay, Hillary, by what Donna Brazile said in public and in her book, you cheated. You funneled money into your campaign. You even stole it from Bernie Sanders. You rigged at least 17 different primaries. Bernie didn't seem to notice any of this. At one point, he was actually cut off from his donors, cut off from your entire computer system of the Democratic National Committee. He had to get lawyers even to get back on. I mean, the nonsense that went on with the Democratic National Committee was astounding. But it was out of that group that the desire to go a step further than the previous investigations into Trump oppositional research that they had already done and could be found on their server, the server in question, the Democratic National Committee server. On that was their oppositional research, but then they had to go further. So the story is they picked up what the Republicans had started, and then they picked it up in April. I don't believe that, but anyway, let's go with that story. In April, they started paying Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson, and all of his people here. It lists all of them. That would be Peter Frisch and Tom Catan and Jason Felch and Neil King. These are then the people also that they worked with in this list. So I'm reading from the list, but the list starts off with Fusion GPS And Bean LLC, that's just another name. That's the corporation that owns Fusion GPS. So when they get sued, like they are now,
Well, those three
by everybody,
Russian oligarchs have that, and they're suing Bean LLC.
Yes, and so is Alexei Gubarev, the person that the dossier named as the Russian who hacked into the Democratic National Committee server, which is nonsense. And then, of course, we get Mary Jacoby, who is Glenn Simpson's wife, and Glenn Simpson, and in the list here. But what some of these people are here, you don't know them. Nellie Orr is in this list. Erica Castro. These are people who have connections directly, strangely, with Hillary Clinton, who then are either out working in the news agencies or were working directly, and sometimes it looks like temporarily, for Fusion GPS as they put together this oppositional research against Trump. In other words, a big bag of lies. And Nellie Orr, of course, is Bruce Orr's wife, who she had been working in the Open Source Works CIA program, so she probably used that when she went over to Fusion GPS. As you can see by the...
And don't forget, she is fluent in Russian, so she could
yes.
have helped write, if not write all, of the dirty dossier.
Oh, there's claims that she's the person who did the whole Russian, came up with the fake Russian names by using her ham radio to listen to Russian news agencies, and also using what she had already as direct access to the Open Source Works CIA program, where you can target people and get any information you want. So Nellie Orr came over to work for Fusion GPS just at the time they were doing this fake dossier. And then Renat Akhmetshin is the Russian who was in the meeting with the Russian lawyer and Trump Jr. and the whole thing. He's a spy, and he's a well-known spy. And so he's been on both sides of the fence, and he's often used for these kind of setups. He was actually the very person who helped Felix Sater set that meeting up in a way to do entrapment on the Trump team early on. Ed Lieberman and Edward Baumgartner are, I believe, they're lawyers. One of them is a lawyer, one of them is a broker. And then the next name, Orbis Business Intelligence Limited, that is the Christopher Steele's company. And Christopher Burrows, it's owned by two people. So the next names you see, Orbis Business Intelligence Limited, Orbis Business International Limited, Walsingham Training Limited, that's a shell company for Orbis. Walsingham Partners is a shell company. And so they're all underneath the banner of Bean LLC. That's what they do. So when they get multiple suits, they just back out of one company and say that they shuffled the work through another. And so there's only two members of this company. So the guy creating all this stir, Christopher Steele, an ex-British spy who spied on Russia, who's been retired, they go into this business much like a Glenn Simpson. Glenn Simpson, when he had learned that yellow journalism, as a writer, he and his cronies had learned that yellow journalism worked, then they go over and they do it like a CIA rogue agent, In the CIA, you learn all the dirt. When you get out of the CIA, you go do your own thing, using the same dirt. So what's Glenn Simpson? Yellow journalist. What is he? Propagandist. What is he? Oppositional research. He calls it integrity research. Ha! They're looking for someone's lack of integrity. Now, Orbis Business is used as basically a shell. Whenever we need to have British intelligence tell us something, they use this silly group, and then this group basically is nothing more than a fake mouthpiece into the media. That's all they really do. They release fake information. They create propaganda, and that's what Orbis Business does. That's what Fusion GPS does, and they do it for all the criminals. And this can be looked up in their history, except Orbis really hides what they do because almost every one of their people that they work for is extremely corrupt. Sir Andrew Wood is the person who told McCain supposedly about the dossier, verifying that it's real. And Paul Hauser was the lawyer for Oleg Deripaska, who's listed here. He's the guy who's the aluminum king in Russia, and he sued Manafort and Gates. They've been fighting for 10 years about this and that, and so they got him involved in all of this, and then his lawyers involved. And then, of course, Cody Shearer and Sidney Blumenthal and John Weiner and Kathleen Kavalek and Victoria Nuland, well, they kissed Hillary's feet when she was in the State Department. They're all State Department people. Especially Victoria Nuland, she's a European representative. She would have been the one involved in doing, with through Hillary's direct contact, no doubt, she would have looked into some of the Russian stuff. But we know who the Russian stuff came from. It came from Ukraine, and it came from Alexander Chalupa, who's on the Democratic National Committee. And we know this because they literally, and read the WikiLeaks, and you will see that it's all laid out there exactly as we've described in previous videos. Daniel Jones, another State Department. Bruce Orrs, the State Department person who met with Fusion GPS. Now, if you think for 1 minute there was only one person meeting with Christopher Steele and Glenn Simpson when they were over here propagandizing and talking to all the news agencies and telling them what was in the dossier and even showing them the dossier, but not giving them a copy. The copy was put out by BuzzFeed. They're being sued by Carter Page and a bunch of other people because it's a fake dossier. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew it wasn't authenticated in the lawsuits that have come forward. Then you get Christopher Steele telling the truth, saying, oh, no, this is a fiction. It was written only for my customers. There's nothing authenticated in here. It was private information. It was never supposed to go to the public. So therefore, well, then why did you meet not only with the FBI and get paid by the FBI in Italy when they first started working with you with this dossier? And then why did you meet with all the different news agency people, some of whom are named right here in this Dragnet that is posted on Truth News Headlines? Why did you do that, Christopher Steele, if you are not attempting to affect the election? This is one of the worst cases of election rigging in U.S. history. And then we didn't even get into the U.S. Digital Service and the way Obama was linked to that and Hillary was linked and Eric Schmidt and all that.
Yeah, but with the U.S. Digital Services, folks, this is really serious. They were actually doing hardcore election rigging right there in the White House using Eric Schmidt and Dude Zuckerberg and this U.S. Digital Services to get the work done. I'll post that article, Thomas, right below.
And some major player in the tech field just quit his job to come over to help the Democrats win. In other words, he's going to pick up where U.S. Digital Services left off in Obama's bunker, where Valerie Jarrett lives with her army of security guarding her because she's a Chicago mob boss, moved to D.C. So let's go on with the list. Sidney Blumenthal, that is the person that no matter what people told Hillary, she was going to tell all the secrets to, and then he told them to everybody, completely compromised. He couldn't get a top secret security clearance because he's a blabbermouth and he's a joke. And then, as I say, there's the whole list of the State Department people, and then we go to the ones that are now big time in the news for the next thing that Grassley did that we'll mention here, and that's Peter Strzok, who is, of course, the second in charge of the FBI's counterintelligence department working under Bill Priestap. He's the one involved in just about all of this, the whole dossier from the beginning, the whole attacks against Trump, the defending of Hillary, the rewriting of Comey's exoneration of Hillary before he even met with Hillary, not recording it, turning a criminal investigation into a matter, and leading what they called, we now find out, because of Peter Strzok's insane 50,000 texts to his girlfriend, Lisa Page, who was one of the top FBI lawyers and worked directly with McCabe. I mean, you can't get any more corrupt than that. So we'll just call them Strzok and Page. So the Strzok and Page texts are the next thing that Grassley was also going after. Now he's taking them apart, the 384 of them, and he's just beating them up. So Peter Strzok is on this list, and then we can get into a whole other group of people, because that's not what Grassley's after. Grassley is after the fact that a crime was committed through the Democratic National Committee, Hillary for America, her campaign, her entire campaign, John Podesta, her campaign managers. This is a conspiracy, and it's a conspiracy to use agents outside of America to corrupt, rig, and try to influence and deride a U.S. election, presidential election.
But she also used forces within the United States government. I mean, you look at Comey and Brennan and the FBI, the DOJ, Loretta Lynch, all of these folks, they're inside. They're not even foreign agents, and they were doing the rigging for her.
Well, but Betsy, nobody else has actually pointed out what we have pointed out. When they get to that point, look how long it takes them to get here. When they get to what we showed them, someone should be charged with treason.
I know. For the longest time, I felt that just people were so idiotic they couldn't see it. And then I realized that they can't see it. They are either not well educated. Well, no, not well educated. They're not educated enough because they didn't take good courses in government and civics in high school and in college, so they don't really know how the government works, so they don't pay attention. And then if they do read the news, oh my gosh, there's so much fake news out there. It's hard to sort through who's telling fact and fiction. Even this morning on Truth News Headlines, I posted an article which one of our readers pointed out was very subtly incorrect. I've made the correction, but it is hard, even for skilled folks like us here at the American Intelligence Media, to catch every nuance. It's just overwhelming for the average person.
Yes, and then sometimes I get so upset that I talk too fast. Like I continuously
slow down.
Say something I will say now correctly, and thank you for 2 or 3 people who have pointed this out. I often misstate Glass-Steagall.
Oh,
Glass-Steagall.
Make an official announcement
this is an official
here.
announcement.
Official announcement.
I made a mistake, and I got to admit it. This will be at least 3 that I've admitted online that people have brought to my attention. So it's the Dodd-Frank, not the Glass-Steagall, that needs to be repealed, but I mean the entire Dodd-Frank. But what I'm speaking about Glass-Steagall is we need to separate commercial banks from investment banks because that's insider trading from the get-go. It should be an oxymoron to allow both of them to exist at the same time in one company. So Glass-Steagall is a 1933 act. What I was saying is we need to go all the way back to that day before Glass-Steagall was even put in place, to say, no, let's use some sensible intelligence and restructure the entire banking system. So I apologize for that. What was the other mistake?
Well, I just want to say,
remember.
and just to remind people, that we are not saying that everything we post is truth. We aim for truth. And when you have corrections as readers or viewers, please feel free to leave them in the comment box at the YouTube video. You can also put them in our comment box on our main site, because it is not our intent to give you anything but truth news. Okay, Thomas, continue on.
And General von Steuben was a Prussian, not a German. That was the other correction.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to thank our people from Leader Technology who caught me in a couple things. Like one day I said something happened 2 weeks later, and it was actually 2 days later, and it was a political event. These things do matter, and we do need to be exact, and that's why we try to present you with indictable information that you can take to your congressman, to your representative, to your senator, that you can take to your state political authorities, or that you can create a lawsuit against them. One person can create a lawsuit against many of these things. If it wasn't for Judicial Watch, we wouldn't have most of this stuff. And then you get to see the corruption. We'll talk about that in a second. But let's finish the names. And this is what shocks people. Yes, Peter Strzok is going to be mentioned along with Andrew McCabe. You can't get any more corrupt than Andrew McCabe. Judicial Watch said yesterday that they're still waiting with their FOIA request to see a single text message from Andrew McCabe during the whole time that he was compromised, and there's an investigation going on with him, but no, they don't have any. How about for the Comey? Has one single text message from Comey's phone come out? No, though it's been FOIA'd. They're holding all that up. Oh, you want to talk about Strzok and Page?
Well,
how about McCabe and Comey? Woo!
Could it be any more obvious that our FBI, at least at the top echelons, are as corrupt as can be, and that it's obvious to all of us out here that by missing text, destroying hard drives, Blackberries, that this is all corruption?
I'll go back to the list, but I'm going to jump on what you just said,
okay,
because Stephen Boyd is now the fall guy for the Department of Justice, because I guess Rod Rosenstein must be hiding somewhere, and he must be hiding there.
Oh, you mean Beta Boy Rosenstein?
Yeah, and he must be hiding there with Jeff Sessions, who only comes out now and again, on certain issues. So Stephen Boyd writes a letter saying, yeah, we're going to give you the Strzok Page text messages, but first, we're going to remove all attachments. Second, we're going to remove any text message that has anything personal in it between the two of them, even though this is a government phone and they're giving 50,000 text messages as two of the top law enforcement officials in America. If they said, honey, let's have sex tonight, and one of them, and I'm sure it says, 50,000 text messages is not about politics, folks. That's about sex. That's not, okay, so imagine all the ones scrubbed because there's a personal remark between two lovers having an affair on their spouses. Then the one I love is they're going to redact all names, and then they specifically, Stephen Boyd says in this letter from the Department of Justice to the Congress, the Judiciary, the Oversight, and the Intelligence Committee, demanding these, then they say we are going to redact all SES names.
Oh, senior executive services. You know, those folks that I like to call Obama's army that are just running around in our bureaucracy up there in Washington, keeping the will of the people from being done. But let me just say this, and back up just a second. Now, you mean these telephones that they used, these mobile phones, were government issued?
Yes.
Yes. We, the people, paid for the service and the phones.
Correct.
Now, and were these people working to get a government paycheck?
Yes.
They're government employees. So who is their boss? We, the people.
And the craziness with this text, at first, Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, looking into the partisan collusion between the Department of Justice and the FBI in relationship not only to the Comey's determination on the email, I have to call it a national security violation. I can't call it a matter, as Loretta Lynch ordered them to decriminalize it from a criminal investigation down to the matter. So we need to see this stuff come forward, and what is happening is the Inspector General is in a fight with the Department of Justice. And Rod Rosenstein was the signature at the bottom of those first two letters in a direct fight with Michael Horowitz. So Horowitz may come around and put on that white hat after all. And if he does, he'd be smart. He'd be like Admiral Rogers, looking at in the 11th hour how bad it is. You better change that hat to a white hat at this point. So anyway, they're in a fight. And so Rosenstein blames it on Horowitz. Horowitz blames it on the Department of Justice. And then Stephen Boyd comes out and says that these text messages came up missing when Michael Horowitz was looking for them, almost trying to blame the missing text on him when he already said in a letter to Grassley, I have the texts. And then later he says, yeah, I have the texts. They were never missing. They're being held to be redacted. And now that they have the texts, they're going to be so redacted by the Department of Justice they'll be useless. But
like
it doesn't
Americans,
matter.
like Americans haven't heard sex talked about. I mean, we see it on the screen on our televisions, and I can't really imagine anything very exciting between Page and Strzok in the ways of sex. So I think we, the American people, are entitled to see every single word that was in those texts.
He worked for the Counterintelligence Department of the FBI, which means everything he did, Peter Strzok, everything Strzok did was a national security issue. So everything on his phone, if he compromised himself by talking or even having an affair, he should lose his security clearance instantaneously. If he compromised himself by putting it in a text, he should go to jail. To begin with, not to mention the content of those texts.
Let's not forget, he is the agent that questioned Hillary Clinton about her emails.
Oh, and then he questioned General Flynn. And then he joined the Mueller investigation, which he called early on, what did he call it? The Secret Society. 2 days, remember, with the insurance policy, which was the dossier, which is Peter Strzok and Page had this little secret language. The insurance policy was the dossier. They were going to use the dossier even after Trump was elected. They couldn't really bring it out until BuzzFeed accidentally, stupidly, printed it because they just couldn't get any traction with it. So somebody at BuzzFeed, an idiot, they kept begging Christopher Steele to meet with them and get a copy, but he wouldn't meet with them because BuzzFeed, they're obviously idiots. They printed the fake dossier, which everybody knew was fake. Anybody who ever read it that didn't know it was fake needs to step down from any position besides that doesn't take a 5th grade or less intelligence to run. Which, please, that means every senator, every representative, McCain, his assistant from McCain International who went over to try to get a copy, but they wouldn't give McCain International John McCain a copy, though Sir Arthur Wood told him that it was valid. And that should demonstrate that it's valid. He's a diplomat. And then when McCain read it, he gave it to Comey. Well, Comey already had a copy because John Brennan got a copy. Because why? They knew because Comey was working with the Democratic National Committee from the beginning, back to December of 2015. Look in the WikiLeaks. We've been yelling this the whole time. Just follow Comey's actions. He created the dossier. He created all these October surprises. And he then later tried to blame it on saying he couldn't say and answer any questions whether there was an investigation about the president. And later said, oh, I couldn't say. And then later he said, well, the reason I lied and said there wasn't an investigation when there was because Bill Priestap told me I couldn't. He's Bill Priestap's boss. But because Bill Priestap is the head of the FBI counterintelligence department, which at one point used to be the highest thing there was, he told Comey that he had to lie to the president and lie to the intelligence agencies, lie to the Congress, and lie to the American people, and then later he blamed it on an underling. That's the kind of idiocy we are witnessing here because of the desperate nature of the shadow government and the deep state and these corrupt lawyers, these Barracuda lawyers, these DC fixers, these criminal Chicago mob, cartel, rogue CIA, White House dynasties need to be stopped. And there are now multiple investigations, I think there's at least 8 or 9, 10 separate investigations into the Clinton Foundation, the email scandal, the collusion, the investigation of the partisanship, the Andrew McCabe, and others who are all under investigation. So we salute those who are doing the good work of the Second American Revolution.
Okay, go back to your list. It's right in front of you.
Sorry.
Yes, I know. I got to get you back on track.
So after Peter Strzok is Andrew McCabe, people would say, well, what did Andrew McCabe have to do with the dossier? You must be kidding. Andrew McCabe's wife got $500,000 from Terry McAuliffe, who sits on the board of the Clinton Foundation and is the governor of Virginia, where Andrew McCabe's wife ran, and then also received, let's not forget, a $250,000 gift from Hillary's super PAC. At the same time that Andrew McCabe was the lead investigator on Hillary Clinton's email national security espionage. Because, folks, it doesn't matter whether she had intent or not. You can commit espionage without intent, and she committed espionage. So Andrew McCabe only recused himself at the end of the investigation and just right before the election. Why? Because they knew that their insurance package, and mind you, Andrew McCabe, Andy, as he's called in the Strzok page text messages, knew all about it. They had the insurance policy. They were sure that the dossier and Comey's good work and the counterintelligence conspiracy called the Trump Operation, which includes that small group there around Comey and McCabe, and that would be Lisa Page and James Baker and Bill Priestap and Peter Strzok, and they included Bruce Orr from the Department of Justice and John Carlin from the Department of Justice National Security Division. That group, which we had named at least half of them, and we had said, look, these people are all corrupt, this is a conspiracy, because Comey actually names them. In one of his testimonies, he goes back and he says he has, I forget, he says how many people, it was under a dozen people, that he goes back and reports everything to, and he writes a memo that he reads to them, which he believes makes it true because of the way that he and Mueller messed up evidence being able to be admitted at a federal level. He believes if he writes a memo, it's the truth. He'd go back, he admitted this, he wrote the memos, he told his inner group, and they leaked it. Every time. And remember Hillary's 8 text messages before the debates stating that Trump is in bed with Putin. Trump is in collusion with the Russians. The Russians are coming. And when the debate started, she couldn't stop saying Trump and Putin. Why was that? That was the distractor factor. She was taking the attention off of her, Uranium One, that she's in bed with Putin, on and on and on. They tried to spin it around so that the narrative would be Trump defending himself instead of Trump attacking her. Now, had they actually gone after the details, how can she even be standing there? Because there is a thing called the Emolument Act, which she defied every time she took a single penny to her foundation.
Emolument Act. You said that so quickly. I want to make sure people got that.
Yes, and anytime she accepted a single penny to her foundation while she was Secretary of State or in any position where she was an elected official, that is a crime. Each and every incident of that. We know that $145 million was given to their foundation while she was messing around with the CFIUS and many other things so that Uranium One could go forward, while Comey and Mueller and Andrew McCabe were covering up the crimes of these Russian oligarchs that were allowed to come in this country and take over the entire uranium production, downblending and enrichment being done by Russians and Russian deals that we had going all the way back to George Herbert Walker Bush, George Bush Sr. So what do we have here next on the list is a person that we shouldn't be surprised by, James Baker. He was the chief counsel for Comey, and he referred to him in his testimony saying, I have conferred with the chief counsel of the FBI. And so James Baker got out of town, just like John Carlin got out of the Department of Justice, jumped ship, hoping that they don't get called. Sorry, you're going to be called. Everyone on this list is going to be called to testify more than likely. Sally Yates, remember Sally Yates told Michael Horowitz he couldn't look at Robert Mueller's investigation, though in fact the law allows him to. Don't forget who Sally Yates is. She's the one who stood up against Trump, said and refused to follow his orders. And remember Andrew Weissman, who's on the Mueller team, applauded her with a text message saying, good, stand up and resist the president's orders. Fun. Loretta Lynch, we know the tarmac. That's the reason she got out of town. That's the reason she refused to do anything about Hillary Clinton's email, even supposedly, putting the big burden upon Big James Comey so that Comey would have to tell the world that she was exonerated before the investigation was begun, and the investigation was downgraded to a matter, and it didn't and was never going to count. And John Brennan is the last person here. John Brennan admitted before Congress that he received, I loved it. At first he said, there was a lot of chatter. Well, and then we received a document. And then we received installments. And so he clearly described the fact that he heard the lies from Fusion GPS as they were working with the FBI in the counterintelligence department, because you have to remember the CIA hates the FBI counterintelligence department. The counterintelligence department of the FBI hates Rasmussen and his group, the National Counterterrorism Center. All the counterintelligence people hate each other. Why? Because they have secret investigations going on, black ops, and when they get in trouble and run over each other, sometimes people die. Their people die because these are national security issues that we can see, if they come to the fore, will create a constitutional crisis in Washington, D.C. The federal zone where we should keep federalism and not allow it out into the states, in my opinion.
One thing that I like to see is there's more transparency. What we're seeing is the different departments and agencies, and certainly this letter that was produced by Senator Grassley's office is transparent. It's put out so that we can all see it. We've totally bypassed the corporate propaganda media. So citizens like us can look at this list. We can do our own searches to see who these people are, and we can continue to follow them until they meet justice.
As a past principal and superintendent, when misbehaving people, including my staff, come before me, oftentimes I just sit there and let them confess and act like I know. And that's what's happening right now. We are seeing the alibis of Donna Brazile. She wrote a whole book on it. We're seeing the alibis of all these people. We're seeing the alibis of John Podesta, the alibis of Hillary Clinton, wrote a whole book on it. Alibis, alibis, alibis. Glenn Simpson's alibis. He insisted that his behind closed doors testimony come out to the public, and so who was that? Dianne Feinstein had a cold and she released it, and then later said, oh no, I released it on purpose because they twisted my arm and I was forced to do so. Why? Alibi, alibi, alibi. I don't hear some of these deep corrupt people coming out right now blabbing their mouth as much as usual, especially after we see their names on a Dragnet list like this.
Anything else you wanted to say in closing?
There's many other Dragnets and there's many other lists. We've made a bunch of them, and I'm just happy to see that many of the people we pointed out and some of the corruption, that the lines of corruption are coming to the light of day, and that as these Dragnets come up, we are seeing some truly familiar criminals come up in these nets.